Today we're going to talk, though, about the judge of stuff. The judge of stuff. So if you'll open up your Bible to Judges chapter 10, we're going to be looking at verses 3 through 5 today. Judges chapter 10, verses 3 through 5. After him arose Jair, a Gileadite, and he judged Israel 22 years. Now he had 30 sons who rode on 30 donkeys. They also had 30 towns, which are called Havoth Jair to this day, which are in the land of Gilead. And Jair died and was buried in Camon. So that's what the Bible has to say about Jair. What was his notable accomplishments? He had 30 donkeys, he had 30 sons, and he had 30 towns named after him. That was his legacy that he left as judge of Israel. 22 years that he ruled over Israel, and the only thing that they could say about him in these verses was the talk about the wealth that he had accumulated over that 22-year period. Just like Tola before him, he had not used his resources. He had not used his influence to change Israel, to point them back towards God, to change their behavior, their attitudes, to lead them back to the Father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. He merely maintained the status quo within Israel while collecting and accumulating riches untold. He was the judge of stuff. He had lots of stuff. Now those 30 donkeys mean something because in this time in history, leaders, rulers, kings, they rode on donkeys. The only time that they rode on horses was if they were going to war, if they were going to battle. But during times of peace, they rode upon donkeys. And not only did this man, Jair, have a donkey, he had a donkey for each one of his sons. So each one of his sons, he promoted them to have be leaders. He promoted them to be known throughout the land that they were representative of Jair. They were given their position simply because Jair was their father. If you remember in Judges 5:10, when we looked at Deborah, there was a verse that said, "Speak you who ride on white donkeys, who sit in judges' attire, and who walk along the road." Having a donkey, riding upon a donkey, was a sign of wealth. It was a sign of position. And it was a sign that you had arrived, that you were a leader, a ruler of those around you. Jair had spent 22 years accumulating material possessions, yet his life ended simply with, he was born, he was buried. That's it. Nothing special, nothing meaningful done in his life with all the resources that God gave him. Nothing. He did nothing worth noting other than accumulate resources. J. Vernon McGee says, in Jair's story, I can see three things: prosperity without purpose, affluence without influence, and prestige without power. I want to take those 3 points this morning that J. Vernon McGee points out, and I want to expand on them each individually and talk about them individually, because we must look at all of the donkeys and all of the cities that Jair had. Did they bring glory to God? Did they honor God? Did they make him a better judge? Did it bring blessing upon the nation, the people of Israel? Did it change their destiny? Did it change their attitude towards God? Did it make a difference in the lives of the people that were around answer is a resounding no. A resounding no. For the people of Israel continued. And while they were not oppressed by their enemies, they also were not devoted to the one true God. And the first thing I want to look at here is that prosperity without purpose is meaningless. Prosperity without purpose is meaningless. Now, when you look up the word prosperity, the synonym for it is success. And that's what I want to focus on this morning, is success. I want to talk about the world's definition of success and how that definition, without God's purpose in our life, without acknowledging, without working towards, without focusing upon God's purpose in our life, that success is meaningless. Right. It has no impact. It provides no value, no eternal value. The world's definition of success is having a great career. It's having positions of authority. It's having a perfect family. It's being a hard worker. It's perseverance. It's being a winner and overcomer. It's being healthy and having a healthy family. That's the world's definition of success. It's being talented. It's being gifted. And in and of itself, that definition is not bad, right? None of those things in and of themselves are bad things. They're not evil. They're things that you and I want to have in our lives. But the problem is, when that success manifests itself in our life apart from the purpose of God, it is meaningless. It will give a brief amount of enjoyment, of happiness. It will give a brief amount of contentment, but ultimately, those things in and of themselves will fail us, for our bodies will grow weak. Our bodies will grow sick in time. Possessions can be taken away in an instant. The poor flooding that's happened in Louisiana, homes destroyed in moments, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, possessions can be taken from us instantly. But God's purpose for your life and my life can never be taken or stripped from us. Amen. So if our focus is upon accomplishing the purpose that God has for us, we can be happy despite the definition of success the world has. Right. There are a lot of people that have been successful according to God's purpose in their life, but would not have been considered successful in the eyes of the world. They did not have lots of money or possessions or the big home. They didn't have all of the gifts and the talents that the world deems desirable. They did not have those things. So in the eyes of the world, they were not successful. If you look at Jesus, he shows us how important purpose is over being successful, over prosperity. Mark chapter 6 verse 3 says, "Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us?" So they were offended at him. John 1:46. And Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Nathanael is being recruited here by Philip to come see Jesus. And he knows that Jesus is a Nazarene and he's a Nazarite. And he says, "Hey, can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Now listen to this. Nathanael was from Galilee. Galilee was looked down upon by the rest of the surrounding areas, right? They looked down on Galilee for being uneducated, blue-collar, low-income people. Galileans looked down upon those from Nazareth. So you get where Nazareth fell within the success department, right? Everyone looked down on Galileans, and Galileans looked down on Nazareth, right? And so Jesus would have been considered from a poor area. He would have been considered to have not be successful, his family not successful in the eyes of the world. But I love what Philip says. He tells Nathanael, "Come and the world's view of success was because of where he came from. He wanted him to judge Christ by a conversation with him, by being in his presence, to see that he was more than the sum of his parts. Because Jesus was focusing on advancing the agenda around him. He did not care about what people deemed as the success, what it required for him to be successful. Because if he had been more concerned with what the people wanted, instead of what the Father sent him there to do, he would have never given his life for us so that we could be spiritually made alive and be able to have a relationship with God. Why? Because the people wanted him to set himself up as king. They wanted him to overthrow the tyranny of the Roman government. So if he would have did what the people around him deemed as successful, he would have never given his life for us. He would have set himself up as king, and they would have a momentary, fleeting happiness until they died, and they were still eternally separated from God. So Jesus recognized that he did not need the acclaim of the people. He did not need to strive to achieve what they deemed was his purpose, what they deemed would make him successful. And because of that, because he recognized that his purpose was more important than worldly success, he changed the course of our world. He affected eternal ramifications instead of just a simple momentary time of peace and comfort and relaxation. And he was able to distinguish purpose from success. And we must realize that in the eyes of the world, we may not be successful because Jesus was a blue-collar worker. He grew up in the bad part of town. He was poor. He was arrested. He was tortured. He was mocked publicly, and he was put to death. But his purpose was greater than what the world's definition of success was.
Amen.
The world would not have considered the 11 disciples successful because they all John ended up in prison until he was a very, very old man on the island of Patmos, and the others all were martyred for their faith, crucified, sawn in two, quartered, thrown off buildings because of their faith. So in the world's eyes, they were not successful. But in the eyes of God, they had accomplished a purpose which had eternal ramifications. It affected our life today because they and Christ were more worried about accomplishing God's purpose for their lives than what the world's definition of success was. So when we look at our lives, we must say, what and how do we define success? And what influences that definition, God or man? I have to stand before you and admit to you that my definition of success is influenced by the world around me. It is influenced. It's hard for me to separate the world's definitions of success from God's definition of success. Why? Because no one wants to hurt. No one wants to be in pain. No one wants to feel like they're in need or living paycheck to paycheck. No one wants to have their lives seem like all they're doing is suffering and in pain and in hurting. That's not what we want. But do we desire to be successful more than we desire for God's purpose to be prevalent in our lives? The second thing that we need to look at is affluence, without influence is meaningless. Jair is the perfect example of someone who had wealth those around him only dreamed of. But instead of striving to use his position, his material blessings, his resources to make change, to influence the people, the nation of Israel, he simply continued to accumulate more and more. If I have my sons, and my sons are spoiled, make no mistake about it. But if I spoil my children, but I do not influence their lives for Christ, and so they die lost, what have I gained? What impact have I truly made if I spoil my children with all that money can buy, but never influence them to fear God, to know God, to want to have a relationship with God, and so they die lost without him? What have I done? Jair did that. He had this melody, this wealth. He gave his sons money and elevated them to positions of power and authority. But he did not influence him or the nation to serve God, to fear God. And so the nation of Israel went right back into its behavior of rebelliousness and running from God and turning to the Baals and the idols and the false gods of the nations around them in 22 years after the 22-year reign of Jair. And when we look at Jesus, we can see that he shows us and demonstrates for us that influence is greater than affluence, because the Bible teaches us that he willingly relinquished his eternal riches to become poor and to take on that of a bond servant, to be a servant to man, a humble servant. 2 Corinthians 8:9 says, "For you know the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, that you through his poverty might become rich." Philippians 2:6-7 says, "Who being in the form of God did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant and coming in the likeness of man." So not only did he forsake the riches of heaven, he also forsook the riches of this earth. Because he tells his disciples in Matthew 10, verses 9 and 10, when you go out, don't take gold, don't take silver, don't take an extra change of clothes, don't take an extra pair of shoes. Only take what you have on your back and what you have on your feet. And you're going to rely on the generosity and the provision of others and the provision of God to take care of you. Jesus lived his life that way. As they went from place to place, he didn't have a permanent place to lay his head. His disciples didn't have a permanent place where they stayed. They were all over the countryside. In fact, the only common point where they're all together consistently at once is a boat. A fishing boat. That is the only thing that they had in common in terms of a place where they all got together and rested, was a fishing boat. They did not work their jobs. They followed Christ. They left their jobs behind to follow Jesus, so they had no income coming in. They relied on the generosity of the people around them. They had no material possessions that was specifically theirs except for the clothes on their backs. And in Luke chapter 9, we see a story, because some people will tell you that Jesus was rich, that he was wealthy because he received gold and frankincense and myrrh at his birth. But if Joseph and Mary were anything like us, they spent that on their other kids and him as fast as they could to take care of them, to live their lives. Joseph was nothing but a humble carpenter. They also want him to be rich because it fits in with the prosperity gospel. That God desires for you to drive a Cadillac and have the biggest house and have all these possessions, that's his will for your life. But Jesus shows us, and the lives of the disciples show us, that while some people that may be God's will, it is not God's will for all people. That's right. That purpose and influence is more important than possessions and wealth. Because Jesus said in Luke chapter 9 to this man who came up to him, he said, "Now it happened as they journeyed on the road that someone said to him, 'Lord, I will follow you wherever you go.' And Jesus said to him, 'Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He's saying, you sure you mean that? Because I don't have anything to give you.
That's right.
If you come follow me, everywhere I go, you're going to have to give up some stuff. Because I don't have a permanent roof to put over your head. I don't have a salary to pay you. I can't take care of your every need by giving you clothes and food. You're going to have to rely on the generosity of others and the provision of God and God alone. So Jesus recognized that affluence fell second place to influence, because we know that even though he was not wealthy in the eyes of the world, his influence far outweighed all of those who were his contemporaries, and it continues to impact our lives today, 2,000 years later. That's influence. He wasn't the wealthiest person, but his name was known because of his influence, because of what he did. Matthew 21, 1 through 5 tells us of how the great triumphal entry happened. When Jesus was coming into Jerusalem the last time before he was to be crucified, he sent his disciples into the city to borrow a donkey so that he could ride upon it to come into the city of Jerusalem. And this is the irony. Donkeys were reserved for what? Kings, right? But Jesus, even though he was a king and had the influence of one who had prestige and power, he could not afford his own donkey to ride.
Right.
Now think about that for a second. That lets you know that influence is greater than affluence.
That's right.
Because the people were ready to make him king, even though he was not wealthy, because he influenced them through mercy, through compassion, through authority, through teaching, through those intangible things that the world does not value. He impacted lives with those things. That's what he was wealthy in, was those things. And so the world, they were influenced by that. They were amazed by that. He influenced them through the miracles that he performed, healing the sick, raising the dead, delivering people from evil spirits. No, he was not rich, but he used the gifts that he had. He used the power that he had to influence the world around him and literally change the world. You and I are still talking about him today, even though he was poor, because of his influence. You and I cannot remain safely tucked away in our world that we have built with riches and with material blessings, because those around us will continue straight to hell as we are safely resting in our pillow mattresses and our satin sheets and our big house and driving our big car. The world is going straight to hell. It does not matter how much we have if we have no influence for Christ, if we're not doing what he has for us to do. And then finally, prestige without power is meaningless. J. Vernon McGee writes, Jair was the outstanding man in the community. The traffic cops probably never gave any of his sons a ticket. But verse 5 does not speak of a monument for Jair. He was buried in an unknown spot. He never performed one conspicuous act. He never did a worthwhile deed. He never gained a victory. He may have had 30 donkeys, but he had no spiritual power. We are living in a day when the church has lost its power.
Right.
He had prestige. His name was known. The names of his sons were known. People knew who he was. Yet he did not exact change, even though he had the prestige. J. Vernon McGee tells of a story right before World War II where the city of Pasadena was having the Rose Parade. And there was a float that was entered into the parade by the Standard Oil Company. And he said it was covered with beautiful roses all over. It was a gorgeous float on the outside. He said, but the theme of the parade was be prepared. Be prepared. So this beautiful float in this parade where the theme was be prepared by an oil company nonetheless. This float was sponsored by an oil company. It ran out of gas. Ran out of gas. So a float that was gorgeous on the outside, that was maintained by a prestigious oil company, ran out of gas in a parade which theme was be prepared. Now that's just filled with all kinds of irony, but it lets us know that no matter what people think of us, without power, we are meaningless.
Right.
Our lives are meaningless. We could talk about being prepared all day. We could talk about what we should do all day. But if we do not act upon that, then it is meaningless. Many Christians today are beautiful on the outside. We say the right things. We go to the right events. We're seen with the right people. But we have no power in our lives. We have the beauty, we have the prestige, but we do not have power. Today we are enamored with celebrity. We want the world to know who we are. Why do you think YouTube is the success that it is? I saw a thing not too long ago on a show called, I believe it was Mystery Diners. And this young man was wreaking havoc at this bowling alley that they were staking out because he was trying to get the next viral video. So he was doing all kinds of crazy things, throwing bowling balls through windows. He was getting on skateboards and going headfirst into the pens. Also, he could get the next viral video. That's what people are looking for. They want their name out there. They want their face out there. They want the recognition of strangers. They want the prestige. They want to be known. But Jesus shows us that power, that purpose is greater than prestige. Because when he died upon the cross, when he was buried, he died poor. He died a disgrace. He was the opposite of being prestigious. He died in disgrace. They disregarded him. He was a liar. He was a blasphemer. He was someone who said he was God, but in the end died just like everybody else. When he died upon the cross, he was the opposite of famous. He was infamous. The world hated him. They shunned him. They were disappointed. Even his disciples were disappointed at what happened, and they ran his way as fast as they could. Yet Christ demonstrates that in spite of what the world thinks about us, God's power is more important in our lives. Because on the third day, Jesus rose again. And he went from being disgraced and being a liar and a blasphemer to being the resurrected Son of God and Savior who redeemed the world. So the world may say that we're nameless, that we're faceless. The world may say that we have no value. The world may say, who are you? I don't care who you are. But if you have the power of God on the inside of you and you're working towards his purpose, you can make a difference that has eternal consequences, has eternal value. If we will not just focus on what's in front of us, but we will look towards eternity, we will see the importance of purpose and the importance of influence and the importance of power over the worldly equivalents. Who cares if people know my name, but God doesn't? Matthew 7, beginning with verse 21. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and not done many wonders in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. What good is it for the world to know our name, for us to have a reputation with the world, but Jesus, when we stand before him, to say, I never knew you. I never saw your online video. I never heard a sermon preached. I never paid attention to what you had to say. I never heard your prayers. Why? Because I did not know you. Yes, the world knew you. Great. That's your reward. But I did not know you. We need to look at our lives and ask ourselves those tough questions. Do I value the world's success? Do I value prestige? Do I value wealth over accomplishing God's will and purpose in my life?
Thank you for listening to this message. We hope that you enjoyed it and were blessed by it. Each month we have people from all over the world who listen to the messages made available. If you've been blessed by this ministry, would you consider making a donation of any amount to help support us as we continue to reach the lost for Christ? Donations can be made online at www.reviveoc.org or by check at Revive Outreach Church, 411 Chatham Heights Road, Suite 101, Fredericksburg, Virginia 22405. Thank you for your prayers and your continued support. May God richly bless you.